Mitchell. That matchup, Sasser defensively. And Mitchell hits a three as well.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak and Craig Smoak.
NFL draft analyst, executive director, Reese's Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, 18, nearly 2 decades as NFL scout, 6-time Super Bowls, 4 championships. Michigan alum Jim Nagy joins us. It's at Jim Nagy, NAGY_SB on Twitter, and does a great job running that Senior Bowl. Jim, how much, I mean, just the fact you run that event, first of all, thanks for your time. I know you're busy as heck during this time, and a lot of times, but being a part of that event, how much even more access and knowledge and insight does that bring you?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me on. It brings a lot more just because, we connect with these guys over the course of the year. We're posting about them over the summer. Our staff's already working on 2022. So when I get done with this draft cycle, I'll jump back in, and they're DMing us over the summer about the game, and you kind of make that connection then. And then you'll go to a game in the fall. You might see them on the sideline, and they'll come over and say hello. And then, you get through the time where they accept the invite, and then you're really engaged with them through December and January. And then obviously you spend a week with them down here. So, you get a unique perspective. You see all the behind the scenes stuff that the teams don't see. I came down to this event for 20 years as a scout, 23 years, I think. And you see it differently from this role. And you see some really good stuff, and these guys are, again, like this year with COVID, having a Senior Bowl during COVID, like these guys had to, adhere to all the protocols and everything and really be mature and on top of their stuff. And you see that. And again, sometimes you see them in a light that the teams don't, because they're usually on their P's and Q's a bit for the team, and they can let their guard down, when they're at training table and things like that. You see them interact with their teammates a little more than the other 30 teams are that aren't coaching in our game. So yeah, you do. I get close to these guys, and you definitely see them in a different light than sometimes maybe the scouts would.
Jim, we cover Baylor, obviously, and this year the American team was coached by the Panther staff. Of course, Matt Rule, a bunch of former Baylor assistants. How do you think they did for their first Senior Bowl?
Yeah, they were great. I wish we could bring back Matt and Coach Flores every year. Those guys were incredible. They were really easy to work with. I've known Matt since he was a GA at UCLA, and I was kind of a first or second year road scout out on the West Coast when he was with the Bruins. So, but I haven't known him great. I know a few guys on his staff, and obviously Scott Fitter and I, their new GM, worked together a long time in Seattle and are very good friends. So it was a great year for me. I mean, having Matt and the staff down here, they made it easy. They were great. So again, I wish we could. We don't assign our coaches. The league office does that, but I wish we could get Matt back here every year.
What's interesting about that is that he is in his second year, and second years for him have always been good at Temple, at Baylor. Is it that easy in the NFL? Because it seems like now everybody really has a chance the way the thing is set up.
Yeah, they do. I mean, that's the great thing about the NFL. I just got doing a couple podcasts today in Scotland and Ireland, and I learned some things. I didn't realize, like, all the big-time soccer over there, it's really run. There's no drafts. There's no salary cap. So there's no parity. The same teams win every year. I had no idea about that. I've never followed soccer before. But yeah, that's why the reach of the game is growing globally, because that's one of the things that draws them to the NFL is that you can go worst to first. I think Matt and those guys have done a great job, since they got there in terms of, overhauling that roster and bringing some really good talented players. You just look at like Jeremy Chin last year was runner-up for Defensive Rookie of the Year, who played in the Senior Bowl the year before, Derek Brown. I mean, they hit on some really good players last year. So you give them another year and more ammunition. I would expect another jump in year two with the program, especially with Sam Darnold. I think that's going to be an upgrade for him at quarterback.
Jim, Baylor didn't have a lot of representation, or doesn't have a lot of representation in the draft this year. They're a bit of a younger team in that regard, but William Bradley King was out there at the Senior Bowl. Just what were your thoughts on watching him throughout the week, and kind of what are your expectations as the draft draws closer for him?
Yeah, I love William. He was one of the guys. He actually called the office last summer. And got me on the phone and was like, what's it going to take to play in the Senior Bowl? That hasn't happened very often. So, no, he's one of the most underrated guys in the draft, in my opinion, because a lot of people are knocking this edge class because there's not a Myles Garrett or a Von Miller. I get that, but there's some really good depth. I think that first group with like Kwity Paye from Michigan and Jalen Phillips at Miami, Azeez Ojulari at Georgia. I think those three guys are firmly in that, that upper echelon. There's a really good group of players that are going to come off like later day 2, early day 3, and Williams in that group. What we loved about him was just how combative he was and how hard he played. At the point of attack, really violent with his hands, played with good leverage, chase to the football. So he gives you something on rundowns. And where I get really excited about him is what he's going to be in like 2 or 3 years from now as a pass rusher. There's a lot of tools there, but just, refinement and technique and nuance of how learning how to rush the passer. When you're talking in that 3rd, 4th round range, he's going to get on the field next year in rotation and play, just because he's so physical and he plays so hard.
Jim Nagy, again, 20 years in the NFL as a scout, and also now the Reese's Senior Bowl with us on SicEm365 Radio. All right, there's this infatuation, this position called quarterback that everybody is always wanting to sometimes overextend with, and we've seen drafts heavy at the top, but have you ever seen one here that it seems like the first, 5 or 6 or 7 picks might be, not 5 or 6 or 7, but there's 5 guys that might get stacked in the first 8 to 10 picks?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really looked back on it. It does seem like a lot. They do get pushed. They get pushed every year historically. I mean, I don't know why that is. The way I think of it is if you're not going to reach, if you're going to not reach at a position, it should be quarterback, because you make a mistake there, you're losing your job. So why would you reach on a guy that you weren't convicted about being a true franchise quarterback and take him early? To me, that's kind of career suicide. But that's kind of what happens. I get it. You got to get that position figured out, or else you're treading water. So. This year's draft. I mean, there are those 5 guys. It would not surprise me if they're all gone there by the first, 8, 9, 10 picks.
Cowboys at number 10. They have problems on defense. Their offensive line has had some issues with the injuries to Collins, even Martin last year, and of course Tyron Smith at his back. It does appear as that almost everyone in front of them, Jim, might go offense. They have problems on defense. Doesn't mean they can't fix some things on offense either. Are they going to end up maybe with the best defensive player falling in their lap, whether it's Sartan or someone else?
Yeah, very, very well could be, and whoever that player is lucky, because he's, I can go on and on about Dan Quinn and what a great addition that was to the Dallas Cowboys. I spent time with Dan in Seattle. I think he's a special guy, one of my favorite guys I ever worked with on a staff. He brings tremendous juice to his position group that he's working with, or whoever he's coordinating, and it's real. It's not manufactured. I think players see right through guys that are just kind of rah-rah guys. I mean, Dan is truly a real genuine guy. He's great with the defensive line, the pass rush stuff, and he's gonna hopefully have the pick of his guys, because you're right. It might be a really long run there on the offensive side.
Former Temple Wildcat, which is not that far down the road from us, Taquan Graham from Texas was a part of the Senior Bowl. What are your thoughts on him and kind of how he stacks up?
Yeah, his best football is still ahead of him. He played out there on the edge mostly as a young guy, and then they moved him inside. But he's got stuff you can't coach. He's incredibly long. I mean, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I did at one point. They were sitting on my desk. But, the guy's got like an 84-inch wingspan. Mm-hmm. He tested off the charts, and the inside play was getting better and better. So it's just he's got such a reach advantage and a length advantage inside against guards. It's just learning how to use it consistently. But, he's a high-end athlete for an interior guy. Kind of like Charles and Menahu. I mean, they're not totally the same player, but in the sense that Charles at Texas he made that move from defensive end to defensive tackle late in his career, and you could see he was figuring it out how to play in there, and now he's getting a bunch of run there for the Houston Texans. So I think Taquan's going to go somewhere probably again like late 3rd, somewhere in the 4th. Because he's just got so much to work with. There's a lot of upside there.
Is a scout's job, Jim, to tell what's wrong with the prospect or what's right with the prospect?
What's right, man? You got to find what can they do? Like, that's what it always was. What can they do? Let's not focus on what can't they do. And that was great with working with, Scott Pioli and Bill Belichick in New England is you identified what they could do. That staff usually did a good job of putting those guys in the situation to do that. Even if it's just one thing, they could cater a role for that player. So, yeah, I think on the outside, in my short 3 years on the outside, I think we tend to focus more on the negative stuff. And that's, I really frankly hate this time of year with the draft because it comes in and it seems like nitpick season on these players. But the good scouts are focused on what they can do and more accentuating the positives.
Does it kind of amaze you sometimes how hard it seems like people, how much people focus on the negatives rather than the positives of a player and try to almost convince themselves that the player is not a good player? I'm not saying it all the way right, but do you think people try to do mental gymnastics too much with evaluations?
I've noticed it more. And again, I've only been on social media for 3 years, but I've noticed it a lot in this draft process. And I've talked to some other guys like draft analysts at other networks and things about this. And they've agreed. This is the worst they've seen it. I feel like people are taking a lot of sides and digging in heels and really bashing some of these players where, just let it go. Like if you don't love the player and you don't see it the same way as someone else, well then, why quote tweet him and comment about like how bad the player is? Just let it go. Let it go. I love it that people are passionate about it, but it's like sometimes there's a tendency to like almost take a personal thing against some of these players, and I don't get that part of it. What
is it like when that clock is ticking and a pick is due?
If you're on the clock or if you're waiting.
Like you're on the clock, whether it's the first round or whatever round, because then it gets to be almost a lightning round. What is that like? Is it like the stock market, or is everyone kind of calm and collective? What's that like?
It's a lot more calm than you would think. You know who the pick's going to be. The anxious moments are when you're coming up to make the pick. And you've got your ring in your hand that the teams above you aren't taking your guy. That's what's going on right now in these buildings. They're all strategizing on, depth at certain positions, on where we need to take a guy. So like for the Cowboys, for example, do we need to take a corner right here, or do we dress another need? Like that's what's going on right now. And so you know who you want. You know who you want in every round at that spot. Like you've identified that as a group, and you feel good about that as a group, or at least you should. But it's those moments, the 2, 3, 4 picks before that you're just, you're hoping and praying that someone doesn't pick your guy. You have to have A, B, and C lined up too. You can't panic and just blindly pivot elsewhere. You gotta have those other guys in line. But when you're on the clock, it's pretty calm. Most draft rooms I've been in, there's been a real sense of calm in there. You've done the work. You just stay confident in your preparation. It's an 11-month, 12-month process. So when you're sitting there at the clock, there shouldn't be any reason to panic.
Is there any more important time in front of a prospect than what you have at the Reese's Senior Bowl, or what used to be the Combine, or even the interaction of anyone visiting somebody's facility when they can visit, which, of course, we know that's changed up quite a bit as well?
Yeah, any face-to-face interaction, and that's why we were really happy we could pull the game off this year for both parties, for the players and for the teams, because these Zooms are great. We've all been living on Zooms for the past year, but I'm just a believer that you can't replicate body language, and I just think you get a better feel for someone when you're sitting face-to-face. So they did that this year behind plexiglass. It was face-to-face, but there were some barriers there. But no, I do think that the interaction they have here, and it's not just the one-on-one personal interaction, it's all the observational stuff that goes along with it. These guys I tell them at the orientation dinner the first night, I tell all the players, like, you are being evaluated every minute of the day down here, and be mindful of that. So, when they're out of practice, before practice, teams are watching how they interact with teammates and, how they're preparing. Are they really going through stretch, how they should be going through stretch, or are they, just going through the motions? And, everything's getting evaluated. So it's a great observational learning week for the teams. And again, they do get a lot of face time around these players. This year was limited because of the structured interviews we had to have in place because of COVID. But in a normal year, there's many interactions throughout the week face to face with the guys.
Jim, do you think that having it somewhat different than it normally would be, and I know that pro days were a bit different as well, do you think that will have an effect on just like perhaps the number of boom or bust prospects versus, I guess, what you would consider normal years?
I think a couple things. I think not being on campus in the falls has really hurt the teams in terms of collecting background and character information. They were on Zoom calls with the schools, and the schools were great. I mean, we were on, as our staff, the Senior Bowl, was on the majority of those calls, and they did a really good job of getting different coaches and sources from the school in front of the teams. But it's just human nature that you're going to get a lot more forthcoming responses when it's you being in a building, shutting the door behind you, and just sitting one-on-one with an assistant coach and a guy that you've known for 20 years. Like, you're not going to get that response in front of 80 scouts on a Zoom call. So there's that part of it. And then lacking the medical information. Now, they brought 150 players to Indy this year and gave them full medical exams, but that's only 150 players. In a typical year, that's almost 400. So there's some missing medical information in this year's draft process that is a real concern to some of these teams. I mean, you're making millions of dollars of investments. You want to know exactly what you're getting in terms of a player's medical history, and not having your team's doctors and trainers, put your hands on these guys and really get a handle on what the injury history was. That's complicating the process probably more than anything.
Jim, last question. Thanks for your time today. Jim Nagy, again, Reese's Senior Bowl, longtime NFL scout and also analyst. Is there a name or two that is supposedly in the first round that you see that might be slipping a little bit for whatever reason, that just from your observations of the chatter?
I don't know about slipping. I was texting with a couple guys last night because they're getting all that medical information back, and it sounds like there's going to be some guys slip out of first because of medicals. I don't have those names, and even if I did, I wouldn't share that because of the medical nature.
Sure.
But,
come on.
They're really scrutinizing these medicals. One of the teams I was texting with last night, they're like, "Man, we just crushed a bunch of guys today," and so there are going to be some guys that you're seeing in all these mocks that won't end up there. But that happens every year. I mean, the league has these guys evaluated differently than all of us on the outside because they're privy to so much information on the character side that we just don't know about. So there's going to be guys that you haven't heard about going in the first, or maybe you've heard of sparingly. And there's going to be guys that have been in all these mocks that won't be there. So it'll be an interesting. That's why I can't wait for next Thursday night and see all this stuff finally shakes down.
I hope things get back to normal. So if Baylor has a chunk of players down the road that might be seniors that are eligible and prospects that we get to come down and cover, the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, it's an incredible event. I actually had been down there one time to cover it for a kid out of East Texas many years ago. Thanks for your time, Jim. Great stuff, and always what you did, and keep doing what you do. Thanks for your time today.
No, I appreciate it, fellas. Have a great rest of the week.
Yes, sir. Jim Nagy, Reese's Senior Bowl, nearly 20 years NFL scout. He mentioned the time with the Patriots, with Pioli and Belichick and all that, and he runs that event, which is a big deal. And Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers were, of course, one of the coaching staffs. One year the Cowboys had that, and you couldn't get enough positive vibes because you're right there sharing with players. You're the ones coaching them. And so you get even more of a feel, not just watching it, but also being the ones that coach them.
Well, hell, it felt like the Cowboys were the regular coaching staff there. It felt like they always were at the Senior Bowl as part of the coaching staff. Yep. But, yeah, I wanted to make sure and ask about Matt Rule and those guys having that time there this year. But very interesting what he had to say, and it's the reason why I asked the question on just the build-up to this and how much, of not having the normal routine and pro days and everything else. I mean, they've had some, but it's just not, like he said, all the same. Like, you're going to see some challenges as a result of that for a lot of these teams, or we're going to see names just disappear that we thought wait, hey, where's this guy? Why is he? Well, probably was a medical thing, and you'll be able to realize that. But yeah, a lot of good stuff there. Biggest thing though to me was William Bradley King and what he had to say about him. I mean, I think there was a time a few weeks ago where I said I wasn't sure he was going to be drafted just because of the reports I had seen on him. It had him as kind of a 7th rounder, as high as maybe a 6, but really it kind of pegged him as more of a 7th rounder, potentially an undrafted free agent guy. So if he can find himself in the middle rounds, I mean, that would be fantastic for William Bradley King and for Baylor football as well.
All right, a couple of college basketball notes.
Okay, go ahead.
You using them?
I was going to use one of them.
Then use both of them. That's good.
I don't even know what the other one is.
There was today, and Craig was going to – are you going to bring this up as well, off the radar?
Yeah, I was going to.
All right, that's good. Craig's off the radar at 4:45 is good stuff, really good stuff. A lot of it college athletics, college basketball, college football. We'll have that. Also, Mickey Spagnola, DallasCowboys.com today, will join us at 4:30.
I'm only mentioning this one. I don't know what the other one you're referring to is.
Right here. Marcus Garrett, who is a good, long, angular, hell of a defensive player. Offensively at times challenged at Kansas, but a guy that, last year, 2019-20 season was the Defensive Player of the Year. Of course, Davion Mitchell this year will not return to Kansas, fully pursue the NBA draft. Bill Self saying Marcus is a great player. I would love to have had him return for another season, but reality, this is the best decision for him, and we fully support that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would say he's making the wrong choice there. I don't know if you saw this. This is completely separate and random, but did you see Epe Udo randomly running into the Baylor softball team at the airport?
No.
Yeah, Epe just tweeted out he ended up bumping into the Baylor softball team at the Des Moines airport. I don't know what's going on in Des Moines. There's so much Baylor representation, but he caught a picture with them. I just thought that was cool.
That's interesting because the last when they went 40-0, Baylor women played in Des Moines, Iowa. And they beat Tennessee in one of those games with Pat Summitt's last ever game. The great Hall of Famer, the late Hall of Famer, on their way to going 40-0 because then they went to Denver. But they beat Tennessee in that regional in Des Moines, Iowa.
And one more Baylor basketball, just a little comment. Did you see that Scott Drew tweet with that Swarovski crystal basketball that they received?
No, I
haven't seen that?
I saw a picture just now, Jerome Tang on his feed with Alvin Brooks. Wow, I have not seen that.
Yeah, Scott Drew, check it out if you haven't seen it.
Armstrong, can we pop that up real quick before the break?
Yeah,
it's
he put it out about
Drew.
2 hours ago. He said, one of the most unique gifts Baylor basketball has received. This ball is made out of Swarovski crystal. #joy. And for those who won't be able to see it, it's an orange basketball with a big white Nike swoosh and a BU logo, and it's just decked out in gems. I mean, whatever they used for that, it's gorgeous, shiny and sparkly and everything else. So that's going to be really cool in the trophy case.
All right.
Or on his desk and wherever.
Mickey Spagnola will come up next, and then Craig will have his off-the-radar stories and notes and nuggets at 4:45. Kevin Curtis, the cornerbacks coach at Baylor, will join us, by the way, a little after 5 o'clock, around 5:15 today. A couple of other notes as well. The PGA Tour, and we'll get to this in the 5 o'clock hour, the bonus program that they've developed for